Good evening, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. In this video, we are going to be talking about the current lumber market conditions and how that is a reflection of the broader economy. I believe that following lumber is one of the best indicators of economic activity, and by following the lumber and the demand for lumber, you can get a good idea of what it is not only taking place within the housing market, but then taking place within the broader economy. So let's dive right into this. Many of you know that I work at a lumber yard. I do retail sales for a living, and I live in the Pacific Northwest. There is really no corner of the lumber market that I can't see. I know mills, I know truck drivers, I know loggers, I know other retail outlets, I know all kinds of wholesalers and vendors. Again, if there is anything that's happening within the lumber industry, I'm generally seeing it firsthand. Now, when I share this information with you, this is really not something that I can tell you where I get it from. I get emails from particular sources that I use to acquire material from, and they have an idea of what it is that they are seeing from their standpoint, and they share that view with us at times. It's not like it's secret information, but it isn't something that I can tell you where I get it from or share a link for you. So you just have to basically trust it. I don't know what you got to do. Take it for what it is. Take it with a grain of salt. I don't care. But this is how it goes down, and this is what it says here. Green dug for weakening a bit on continued lack of demand. Now, this is something that I have talked about for quite some time, that the demand for lumber is down, and from the lack of demand comes mill curtailments. If you have mill curtailments, then you have inventory depletion, and that is what I believe is taking place. Right? So the lack of demand, mills don't produce unless you have demand, right? So supply-demand balances. When you have a low demand, low supply, inventory depletion, and this is the current situation that I believe we are sitting in now. Okay, let me continue on. It says KD species in general are a bit firmer as we await the ruling on the CVD-AD duties for wood coming out of Canada. Now, for those of you who haven't been following lumber, there is the threat of countervailing duties and anti-dumping duties that are going to be put on Canadian lumber. Now, this is not new, right? This is something that has been taking place for a very long time. And again, like, Biden, put these countervailing duties on lumber. Trump administration did it. It's going all the way back to the 80s. It's not new. This is not something that is new. Okay, so I just want to make sure that people are understanding that. Because you think about it, how much fear and uncertainty and doubt was pushed through the mainstream media about a 25% tariff on Canadian lumber that never manifested itself into reality. This is going to be happening in the next few weeks, and it's literally like crickets out there when it comes to any mainstream media news source pushing that information. So again, this countervailing duty, anti-dumping duty will be taking place in a very near future. So let me read this again. KD species in the KD kiln dried, right? Species in general are a bit firmer, talking about the prices, as we await the ruling on the CVD AD duties for the wood coming out of Canada. The higher rates are supposed to be announced soon. While this puts some upward pressure on the market for the short term, I imagine it will equalize pretty quickly as demand is still weak. This is the important part. Everybody says, oh man, the prices is going to go through the roof. Not without demand. Demand is absolutely critical to this. All right. We will just see less Canadian lumber coming across because of increased duty rates. And that's what I believe is going to take place. The United States is a huge producer of lumber. And this is where I think a lot of times people get they misinterpret the information. They'll hear something 80% of all lumber or all imported lumber comes from Canada, and they hear 80% of lumber consumed comes from Canada. That's not right. 80% of what we import from foreign nations comes from Canada, but we really only consume about 20 to 25% of imported wood. Most of it we produce ourselves. We could literally produce all the wood we want, right? I mean, depending on the demand, right? I mean, within reason, I guess I should say. Okay. let's see here. OSB, oriented strand board. So for those of you who are familiar with sheathings and different types of plywood, OSB is a chipboard that has been glued together to form a sheet like plywood that is used very similar to plywood, and it's generally a lesser product and cheaper product, and it's very popular in the southern part of the United States. There is, I mean, we use it up here in the Pacific Northwest as well, but it's somewhat water sensitive, so generally it's not as popular or as used as much here in the Pacific Northwest as it would be down south, right, where the weather is not the problem. It says this, even though we are already at investment levels, meaning that it's pretty low, she slipped a bit more, meaning the prices come down. Again, this is the lack of demand. Right? This is on the heels of a Western Canadian mill losing nearly a week of production due to a small fire. Roughly 50 carloads of production volume taken out for the week with zero impact. Like nobody even noticed, cared. Like I didn't know about it until I read this email, and I got this email. So the email was sent out a couple of days ago, but I was reading this morning. I think it was sent out Friday. This is when this email went out. With zero impact. That in itself points to the lack of demand out there. Right? And so it's like, it wasn't just me. Like people say, oh man, you just, you're just seeing it from your particular area and you need to go to some place where, there's a lot more activity happening or something of that nature. And it's not like, I get it. There are pockets of operation within the nation that seem very active. And by looking at that isolated area, you're going to be like, I don't know what you're talking about. We're kicking butt, right? Well, that's wonderful, because you're right. Your little area is. But it doesn't mean that the broader economy is kicking ass because your little spot is doing well. It really needs to be considered like what is taking place within the broader economy, within the entire building industry, not just not just the hot pockets, right, but the bigger broader area. And by following lumber prices and the mill production, or at least the supply coming from the mills, this is a great indication of economic activity. I mean, you think about it, like when somebody is confident about what it is that's going to be happening in the future, then most likely they're probably going to take a jump into those bigger projects. But if they are fearful, if they have the uncertainty and if they have the doubt, then most likely they're going to back away from those projects. And those bigger projects, there's no better indicator than the lumber supply. It just literally, that's it. That the lumber industry is probably the best indication. Other people talk about truckers and all this other stuff, and there is ways you can actually follow the trucking industry. And there's a way that I actually get some good anecdotal evidence from the trucking industry, and that is by getting a phone call from the brokers who are looking for stuff to haul. Like they got a list of truckers who are ready to haul stuff, and they are looking for stuff to haul. And they are calling me up, being a lumber yard, to see if they can have any, see if I have anything that they can, ship around or freight around. We don't really use those services, but the fact that I get a lot of those calls coming in is leading to me to believe that the truckers are looking for work, or that there's less trucking demand, which means less economic activity happening out there. Now, that's a great indicator if you can follow those little tiny pieces of the industry that aren't necessarily very telling out there on the website. Like, go to, whatever website to find out how much, trucking demand is coming from the brokers by their phone calls. Like you can't find that evidence anywhere. But there are places you can go to see, how much trucking demand there is. The lumber industry, for me, like I have that same thing going on. Like to me, I have all these different places that I can look to see what it is that's taking place within the lumber industry that isn't going to be necessarily exposed to the average person out there. You can go to the lumber futures, but then that doesn't necessarily tell you like inventory levels or, mill curtailments or something like that. You really have to follow somebody like, say, Madison's Lumber Reporter, or there's another one out there called Random Lengths. These people compile that information, but then they charge you for it. So anyway, here's the other email that I got, and I thought I had some pretty good information that then lends right into everything that we're talking about here. Eastern SPF, spruce pine fir, says Eastern mills are still on summer shutdowns and inventory is overall fairly lean. Right? Just like, not much demand for OSB. Here it is. Again, inventory is fairly lean with these mills in summer shutdown. Let me see. It goes on to say here, Southern pine in all zones. Production is still keeping pace with purchases and vice versa. Right? So there's this equilibrium happening here. Goes on to say some mills in the West are curtailing production of 2x6 and 2x12s. Now, I can only assume that if they can't get the prices higher, because right now, really, when you think about it, prices are fairly low. If you cannot get the prices to go higher, even though you have this, demand balance happening, you're going to start cutting back on the supply in order to increase the demand, right? And then up go the prices. And so we can see this already happening within this industry. And I've been talking about the mill curtailments for years now. So it's not a surprise to see it happening down in the southern part of the United States too. I'm up in the area where they do a lot more Doug fir production. And that's generally what you were looking at on the futures is green Doug fir prices and not necessarily the southern yellow pine prices, which that futures price is starting to come up and people are going to start paying a lot more attention to it now too. But anyway, continuing on here. Western species of dry dimension. It goes on to say this. Some buyers decided to get some material coming through the pipeline in preparation for the upcoming Canadian duty increase in the coming weeks, right? So again, this is brought up. People are anticipating this countervailing duties and, but this is not new, right? So you're not seeing like this dramatic rise or all this like, crazy news stories or news coverage of it. This is something that is expected and they are acting accordingly. Right? The Doug fir larch continues to trend in a flat to upwards trend as supply currently lacks more so in these species. Right? So again, this is signs of the inventory depletion, or lack of the inventory. Goes on to say inland mills continue to show very little fir larch, and this trend is expected to continue for the foreseeable future. So now that's something that I thought was pretty interesting to read. And now I'm out here on the Pacific coast, right? Pacific Northwest coast. But it's talking about the inland mills having issues acquiring the fir larch in order to meet that production, like the demand for Doug fir. Anyway, I thought that was pretty interesting. I guess we'll learn a little bit more about that coming into the future. Let's see. Here's something interesting I found. OSB, this is the other letter that I got. It said this. I didn't even know about this. But anyway, there was this week, Arbeck, if I'm saying it right, announced that their mill in, and forgive me if I get this name wrong, Miramichi, I'm guessing that's a place in Canada, will be down for a minimum of 2 weeks in September. They are reorganizing the Miramichi mill and stated a longer outage is quite possible. The mill produces approximately 400 million square feet annually. So I can't imagine them pulling that much square footage off the market. They're just going to be down for a few weeks. And really, when you think about 52 weeks being in a year, I can't imagine them pulling that much OSB off the market. But then again, here it is, right, during the time in which that we should have the most demand for lumber. These guys are shutting down production in order to, increase their facility or, deal with the maintenance of their facility. Doug fir plywood. Interesting one here. Just about finished with July and have not witnessed a summer buy. That again, has been something that I have been talking about for months now, is that there's no demand, right? There will be at some point going into summer, right? When you're in the summer, this is the time that you want to be framing houses together, putting together the structure, dry it in so that you can go work on the interior, right, during the wintertime. So summertime is framing season. This is where the demand for plywood would be highest. And here it is, just about finished with July and still not witnessed a summer buy. Nor will we probably this year. A fir log cost continues to be the highest basket nationwide. Mills continue to battle to break even. So again, like if they cannot make it with the production that they are doing, they will curtail. and then inventory depletes. All right. This is what I'm continuing to share this morning with you because it takes years to build up. I mean, many people thought I was like some sort of super genius when I was able to call out the lumber industry as easily as I did on this channel. Now, those who followed me back then, they witnessed it happen. I mean, I was all throughout 2019 talking, sharing stories, sharing places like up in, Canada that were shutting down production of mills, lumber production. It was depleting fast. And I was saying it throughout 2019. It was bloodbath after bloodbath of mill shutdowns and curtailments. And I knew at some point there was going to create an issue, right? I did not see COVID coming in the way that the demand for lumber was going to explode. But when it did, I knew that the mill production would come back. And that mill production came back and it ramped up very dramatically, and it was able to take lumber prices from $1,700 per thousand all the way back down into $300 per thousand. Today, we sit at $680 per thousand or so, just shy of $700 per thousand. Now, the peak prior to COVID was $650 per thousand. Now, this is per thousand board feet. You don't really have to try and figure out. I mean, there's plenty of ways on the internet to figure it all out. But to just know that it was at 650 per thousand prior to COVID, and it's at 680 or just shy of 700 today. We have not seen a dramatic rise in lumber. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of times that you will find out there people are like, well, a 2x4 used to cost $2. Well, yeah, okay, that's great. Everybody's got to understand that a fiat currency system has inflation baked into it, that you're going to experience inflation. To say that the prices back then were this and what they are today, I get it, man. I mean, it's a painful experience to go through. But to also understand that lumber prices really haven't moved that much since 2018. I mean, here we are 7 years later and experience prices that are not too far off from what we were experiencing back then. Now, if we go into any sort of increase in demand, and I mean, I could not tell you where this demand is going to come from, whether it's a drop in interest rates or a rise in wages all of a sudden, whatever causes the fear, uncertainty, and doubt to fade away and bring people back into economic activity that will then show itself in the bigger projects, which would generally and most definitely, in my opinion, present itself inside of lumber. I think we are set ourselves up right here for it. I mean, it's all presented right here, right? Now, we can cloud it with all kinds of other thoughts, right? Government conspiracies and, mills trying to make money and all this other stuff. And you're going to find plenty of those comments down in there. That's great. None of those people can actually call out the lumber market. I called out the lumber market. I called it out better than anybody else out there on the internet. It's what actually made me very popular here on the internet. It's what got me noticed by all the bigwigs out there with these hedge funds, got me down to the rebel capitalists to go speak on stage. This is what's happening within the lumber industry. Anybody else who tries to tell you different, I don't know, man. I mean, I guess you can follow them. They're pretty entertaining, right? Those are entertaining people. I'm going to read you one last thing, right? What was it here? The Western SPF. Gradual increases in the number 2 and better list prices as producers continue to push pricing ahead of the upcoming AD/CVD measures. So I think that was just the last of it right there. I just want to make sure I got it out for you guys. But again, to try and internalize this information in a much better fashion, in a much more reasonable fashion, one that you can actually internalize and use and hold, okay? Because this is going to be a big deal at some point in the future. When the demand ramps up, when the demand for lumber starts to pick up, you're going to find that there is not a lot of supply out there. These mills have been in curtailments and slowdown in production for quite some time. I have been reporting on it for a while. When this takes off, you are going to find a lot of conspiracy theory-minded people out there, but you're going to be focused in on what it is that's truly taking place. If lumber is a necessity for you, you're a contractor, you're even into real estate. Like, I mean, you think about it, lumber is a big deal for you if you're into real estate. How much is actually starting? How much is taking place? How much demand for this lumber is going to create houses, and how expensive are those houses going to be? There is a lot of questions that can come up if you're into real estate. If, you know, same thing with the mortgage broker or the carpenter or the person who's looking to buy a house. Having this sort of information, this sort of understanding view of the lumber industry is going to give you so much better understanding of what is actually taking place within the housing market, within those other sub-industries that are wrapped around not only the lumber industry, the building industry, but then the overall production of things that are taking place within the general economy. Like, you think about it, if lumber demand is ramping up, most likely other industries are probably ramping up as well. Okay, Uneducated Economist. You guys let me know.